So it's that time of year again. I can't believe that year has just whizzed by. We look back at the last 12 months at this time, usually, and the cinematic beasts, good and bad, that have made an impact on us. Somehow I've managed to get most of the Boys on Film team here. Raj is here, Paul's here, Dan, Chris and Matt, but we're missing the gremlin of the lot, as Sean is fanning around in Paris or something. He's got a good excuse. How are we all doing?
Good,
yeah.
good.
So we've called this video the Boys on Film movies of the year. It's always really hard, isn't it, whittling down to the top 10, but somehow you've all managed to create a list of your favourite movies. Raj, has it been a good year in terms of films?
It's been a pretty good year, I think. My only problem is fitting in time to watch all the films I want to see. When I was doing my list, I was like, I still haven't seen that one. Still haven't seen that one. So, but I think the list I've come up with is pretty representative of what I would probably pick anyways. So, yeah, looking forward to hearing the rest of your lists as well.
I know at least one of those films that's going to be in there without a doubt, because we reviewed it together and we both gave it 5 stars, but we'll come on to that. Paul, how was your list? Is it full of horror? The pop horror maestro?
2 out of 10 are horror.
Shocker.
Ooh.
Dan, I think you've probably got more than 2.
Mine are pretty much all horror. I mean, I think about I'm so into it. I mean, in terms of the year, it's been quite patchy, I think, quite mixed in terms of quality, but there's been volume. So there's been loads to watch, and there's been some really good stuff in there, and then a lot of not good stuff. But yeah, most of mine are horror.
Chris, I know you're quite partial to a bit of spooky stuff.
I am. I've just looked, though, and I think there's only 3 out of my 10 that you'd classify as a horror film, although there's an argument that quite a lot of them are as well. But yeah, it's probably only 3 or 4. I think it's been a great year too, and I agree. You know, I think we've all had a lot of opportunity to watch a lot of films thanks to Boys on Film, which I'm really grateful for. And actually, what's interesting about my top 10, I think, is that it's things that I wouldn't necessarily have hunted down and chosen to go and watch. And I really like that about what we do here, because I get to see stuff that I wouldn't normally see, and a lot of the times, those are really great films. So I'm really grateful for having seen some of them. Yeah.
And how about you, Matt? How has it been in terms of films that you're seeing in the US compared to what we see? I guess it's very similar stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we get things a little bit earlier. Obviously, American movies we get earlier than you probably get them, unless there's some giant release. But there's some things that you probably get, maybe through the festival stuff you've seen that I haven't seen yet, that I know probably will be on this list. So I have some addendum movies that I kind of shoved in at the bottom. Like, I haven't seen this yet, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be in the top, but that might be cheating.
I get jealous quite a lot of the time when I see that the people in the US always get films first, or usually get films first. I'm really angry. It's particularly I think it was Longlegs that I was really looking forward to. We'll come on to that because I know that could be a controversial one, but we're going to start in particularly negative fashion, I think. So we're going to start with our stinkers. Now, have we got a film that really stood out for you guys that you just couldn't put yourself through again? We'll start with you, Raj. Is there one film that is so bad?
As much as I hate saying this, and I'm a massive DC Comics fan, Joker 2 was pretty terrible.
Wow.
Yeah,
in terms of star rating, would that be a 1 then?
That would probably be a 2. I wouldn't say it was a 1, but yeah, I was pretty let down, as were a lot of people who had high expectations for that second installment, because the first one was so brilliant. The second one just kind of fell flat on its face. Didn't quite have the impact that the first one had, or even come close. I think it was a little bit too ambitious with the musical styles that they tried to do, and it was on paper a good move to bring Lady Gaga into the film, but I don't know, it did not all come together for me, so that's my stinker.
I'm generally just looking now, because I've got my list here and I made some other notes. I don't think I have a stinker, because I think I just, anything that is a stinker I just avoid. I don't get to see films as much as I want to, and also I always try and judge films by their sort of budget and aspirations and whatever, so I've maybe seen some films that aren't that good, but I wouldn't necessarily say they were a stinker. Yeah.
Because you work with a lot of people that are involved in, you yourself work in theatre as well, but I think you can kind of understand the hard work that goes into films, which, you know, I think that's overlooked sometimes, isn't it? It's like you can think a film is really terrible, but you've got to admire the passion that's gone into films. Though
I think the ones that are really the ones that are proper stinkers was when they have everything in their favour to be good. So, say for example, it's a good origin story, good character, good source material, a good franchise, amazing budget, good cast or whatever. And then I guess word gets round about a lot of these, unless you go to review it and I don't have to, then I'm not not gonna see it.
So no stinker.
I mean,
apparently
the Back to Black film was awful.
Leslie Manville's in it though.
I quite liked it.
Is it in your top 10 list though, Chris?
No, it's not that good.
I waver between the films that I found boring and the films that actually inspired a visceral reaction of just anger of just how bad something was. So Strangers Chapter 1, sorry, not Chapter 2. It may as well have been Chapter 2 because it's essentially just a remake of the first one. I without being too dramatic, I felt quite insulted as a viewer watching it because I'm just like, this is just so badly done.
Wow, that's a great word. I felt insulted. Yeah. Like, stick that on the billboard. I felt insulted as a viewer.
I think it was in my review, I was just like, it's just utterly artless. Whereas, but then again, the films that are boring, they pass you by. So there's something quite fun about seeing something really bad and being ranty about it. I quite enjoy those reviews. So, I just...
Longlegs.
Terrible. Yeah.
Chris, you must have a stinker.
Yeah, with something that you made me watch. Actually, something that you made me...
I was waiting for that.
I'm not going to cheat and tell everybody about the film that you took me to the cinema to watch that was made in 1984, which I loved.
I took you, I forced you to see it.
Well, basically, yeah, it was gunpoint. That was made in 1984, so I can't talk about that. But we saw a film called Lovely, Dark and Deep, and it was none of those things. It was awful. It was not lovely. It was shallow as a puddle and deep as... nothing. I mean, it was awful. I just was looking back at my notes, and it was just like rant. Just everything about it was just terrible.
On the poster, you can imagine there being an asterisk that's like that. That says may not contain any of the. No, may not be any of the above.
I love it. Yeah, I didn't enjoy that either.
Didn't come out this year, but its sequel came out this year, and I don't understand the love of this movie at all. But I wanted to, when you investigate a film and you want to see why people love it and why it's a big thing, I watched Terrifier 2, and I turned it off after like 30 minutes. I just thought it was so stupid.
Dan's a big fan.
We reviewed that last year, Phil, didn't we?
We did, yeah. And the first one, we thought the second one was even more grisly than the first, didn't we?
I wanted to see Terrifier 3, but I couldn't. There was a screening, but I couldn't make it or something. It's not great.
So that's your stinker.
It's not.
Yeah, I think that came out this year, didn't it?
Terrifier 2.
I think it was last year.
Yeah, I didn't mind it, but it's too long and it is a load of nonsense. I have thoughts on the third one, which I quite liked, but I'm not a huge fan of number 2.
Have you seen the third one, Matt?
No, I haven't, and I've heard that was the best one. It's not that the gore doesn't offend me. It's just so badly. It's not funny, and I think it's trying to be funny, and I just thought it was dumb. I don't know. It's just like. I think I'm not the audience for it or something. I didn't get it.
Well, my stinker is another horror. It's The Exorcism with Russell Crowe, which should have been kind of entertaining, at least because it was so hilarious. I mean, there were parts of it that did make me lol, but for the wrong reasons. But yeah, I mean, what's the point? I mean, it's such an insult as well to that whole kind of Exorcist legacy, which essentially it was ripping off. Dan, you probably saw it as well, didn't you?
I haven't actually seen it. I mean, what annoys me more with that is the premise is so cool because it's sort of about Jason Miller, who played Father Karras in The Exorcist, and there was a bit of like background with that. So actually, that could have been a really cool story, but apparently the execution was just terrible.
Just all the cliches, all the tropes, all the kind of like back-breaking stuff that we've seen so many times, and people crawling up the walls and stuff. It's like, just stop.
I don't know why Russell Crowe exorcism movies now a genre. Like, it's weird.
I know, it's not the first one he's been in, is it?
I think we spent more time trashing the movie after the review.
So we've all got a top 10 list of the movies of the year, the good stuff. Coming on to the good stuff.
My top film, which I think might be pretty high on your list, Phil, is Love Lies Bleeding. I just love that so much. Like, thought it was original. I thought the cinematography was great. I thought Kristen Stewart and the other actress were just both fantastic. I love the fantastical elements of the movie, which was quite surprising. Like, I think I've watched the movie like 3 times now. So
yeah, because we saw it on the big screen together, didn't we? And then you've seen it since a couple of times.
Yeah, and I own it on Blu-ray, so that's always a good indication that I actually like the movie. But and going over all the movies I've seen this year, I'm like, that's the one that I would go back to. And
it's so good. And it's like, when you think about St. Maud that Rose Glass did before as well, it's kind of a different movie because it's more of a mainstream movie. It's more kind of action, I suppose, than St. Maud, even though St. Maud had a creepier vibe. But yeah, still horror, obviously, but more genres in with the horror.
Yeah, and even some comedic elements to it. Like, it was all the right amounts of what a perfect movie should be. The recipe of making a perfect movie. So for me, like, when everyone asks me what my favorite movie of the year is, I'm like, Love Lies Bleeding. Go see it now. Watch it.
And a couple of the other films in your list that you want to mention? Not necessarily number 2 and 3, but...
Okay, well, pretty high up there, too, is The Last Showgirl that we saw pretty recently. So I think it's the time for the Pamela Anderson renaissance. So, and even the whole, like, the Q&A that we went to with her was just spectacular. And I think the movie is going to really hit the awards season pretty hard as soon as the rest of the world sees it, because I don't think it's in wide release just quite yet, but it should be.
I think she's got a Golden Globes nomination, hasn't she, for Best Actress, I think.
Has she? Oh, that's great. That's a good positive sign. Near the lower of my list is MAXXXINE. I know I don't really do horror, but I do love the X trilogy. And I thought, maybe you may or may not disagree, but I thought the MAXXXINE was quite a good bookend on that trilogy and kind of wrapped things up quite nicely. And, it's set in the 80s and it's really cool, and Halsey was in it, and, the horror scenes, the gore wasn't over the top. It really felt like a, kind of a modern day noir of the 80s. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I kind of want that story to continue, actually.
Yeah, I think there were rumours he was going to think about continuing it, but I think he is done and dusted with it. I guess you could continue it. That aesthetic you could continue, because it's a great story, isn't it? All 3 films thread really well. I thought thread well together.
To be honest, I struggled between the top 2, and I kept swapping them back and forth. And I think I settled on my top 1 being Emilia Perez, because it almost was the substance, but I think some other people here might be talking about the substance. So I thought that it really stuck with me. Very interesting, odd film, and it's a musical, but it's not a musical that's all kind of like show-stopping number. It's kind of like
jazz hands.
The music and song sort of grows out of the situation, a bit like Dancer in the Dark or the film adaptation of London Road. So it's quite realistic, and I think there's something quite dark and gritty and quite sad about the portrayal of Mexico and kind of violence against women and gang culture, and the performances in it are fantastic. Zoe Saldana is unrecognisable, but not in that kind of Charlize Theron monster, I've lost loads of weight and got prosthetics on. It's just because the character is just so drawn and sad and depressed, and also she's speaking with a great Mexican accent, and also Selena Gomez as well. Both times I had to notice the person next to me and say, is that Selena Gomez? Is that Selena Gomez? Is that Zoe Saldana? And the lead actress is amazing as well. And for a trans actress she also plays the main character before they transition, so that's quite an interesting thing for a trans woman to do, and it's a really, really interesting performance. So yeah, that one, I think it's kind of stayed with me. And I think what's interesting is when I first heard the premise, it's kind of like a really mean, tough gangland boss who transitions. I thought it was going to be quite a crass sort of white chicks type story of someone who changes gender to not get caught, which is quite grim, and particularly with how people are so mean about trans people these days. But actually, it's not that at all. It's someone who they've always considered themselves a woman, and they want to transition, and they fake their own death as a gangster in order to be a woman and live the life they want to do. And then there's an element of redemption that comes with that. But then, because it's a movie and it's interesting, it's actually about how much can you get away from your past, even if you've, you know, the things you've done, are they going to catch up with you? So yeah, it's really good. And Nora, I loved. I've not seen enough films this year, and there's a lot of stuff, and I know some of the stuff you're saying I should have seen. And the other night I had a bit of time, and I was like, do I watch Love Lies Bleeding or do I watch Nora? And I chose Nora, and I thought that was great. Great pace, really, really great storytelling. Has some comparisons to Sean Baker's original, I think it was his first film, Tangerine, in terms of there's quite an extended sort of like, not chase, but kind of like hunt around town sequence. It's really good. All of Us Strangers, just so moving. Kind of, it kind of makes me sad thinking about it, but like incredibly powerful piece of work. Strangely overlooked, I think. I don't know whether it is waiting to get its accolades in this next season or whether it was just completely overlooked because, like, no BAFTAs or anything. Maybe it came out a bit too late.
It's giving me goosebumps as well, just thinking about it. I ugly cried to that in front of Jeremy, which was very embarrassing. I couldn't put myself through it again, though, but it was, incredibly powerful. It's
great. And then probably the one on here that people might not know so well is a film called Reawakening, which is a British independent film with Juliet Stevenson and Jared Harris about a couple whose daughter goes missing, and many years later she seems to reappear, and it's kind of how they deal with that. And in my day job I work in the charity Missing People, so it was very interesting to see that and kind of see its representation and how gently that story's told, but it's quite gripping as well.
Kind of actually was quite interesting. So Love Lies Bleeding and All of Us Strangers were both kind of in my list, and I kind of consider them almost horror adjacent. I mean, All of Us Strangers less so, but it's kind of a ghost story in a way. Yeah, I mean, and the amount of trauma that it caused me as well is probably the most I've got in any film this year. And I, sobbed all the way to Charing Cross from the cinema watching that. So,
which scene, out of interest, really hit hard for you? Was it where she's singing the words of
my scene, which I'm trying to talk about without going, is there was a scene in the bed where I think it's just her and him. He's in the middle talking to his dad and talking to his mum intermittently about. I think she says something about the crash and did it hurt, and there's just a lot of stuff, and
I've gone chilly.
It was, and it's in Croydon as well, which is really weird because it's literally here. So seeing the Whitgift in a Hollywood movie was quite fun.
Does that mean you're going to be doing a video on location shoot?
Yeah, I actually have been to the house. I went there about a week after I saw the film, just because I was going. And it's really cool because it just is his house from his youth. It looks exactly the same, so it's very weird.
And it only had the 4 actors in it, didn't it? There's one other character who you hear their voice of, like a waitress, but I think it's
I think there's the waitress and then just the ensemble. Yeah, because it's all about loneliness, isn't it? So there's just nothing else going on.
He's a great director, Andrew Haigh. Do you remember we interviewed him a few years back, Raj? Was it Lean on Pete, the movie?
Yeah, we got our picture taken with him and everything.
Yeah,
so.
Really nice guy, wasn't he? He was really down to earth for a filmmaker. Yeah. Like, I'm not saying all filmmakers are kind of egoed up, but he didn't seem full of ego at all.
So there was that one. I think Civil War, while we're talking about non-horror but horror adjacent, also is another one that just I left the cinema like actually quite shaken up. I think the gunfire in that film they've done something to the sound mix, but it just felt like people were shooting at me. It was just really good. I don't know if anyone's seen that, but I really liked it.
There's a couple of really disturbing scenes in that film as well.
Oh, it's again like there's that whole scene with Jesse Plemons, which is just terrifying.
Yeah.
So lots of really weird horror adjacent stuff, which isn't quite horror. But my number one, which is very predictable, is The Substance, because I think it's the only film I left the cinema like, and you'll know, boys, because you were there with me, was just such a reaction. It was just everything I wanted it to be and more. I was just so overjoyed with it. It was just such fun to watch. But I just thought it was so good as well. It was so smart. It was like a weird Brothers Grimm sort of fairy tale. But
and also it deserves the praise as well. Because sometimes with films that get really hyped, Longlegs, come back to that again. Yeah. But, you're always disappointed, or often disappointed by hyped films. But this really did live up to the hype.
It absolutely did, and I think I loved MAXXXINE. It's great. I enjoyed it, but I still had a feeling of like, it's not quite what I wanted. It didn't quite get there. With The Substance, it was just like, we all left just like wanted to talk about it and dissect it and see it again. And I wanted to just go and watch it with everyone I knew and just watch them react to it.
Interestingly, kind of like technically a French film, as is Emilia Perez, I think. I was just thinking that my top two are both French films. And what's quite nice, I mean, Emilia Perez is a bit different because it's Netflix, but the substance, obviously it came very well reviewed and looked like it was going to be this big sort of indie thing, horror, but actually, I don't know the figures, but it seems to have made quite a stir and done quite well. Or maybe that's just in the circles that I'm in, which is middle-aged gay men. Everyone goes to see it. Like, yeah.
All of
I don't
us.
think everyone's in that. I don't think everyone's
apart
in
from
that.
Dan.
Dan's still maybe. And, you know, obviously, like, I think, you know, already there's the Golden Globes and stuff. And so I think it's going to actually, you know, which you know, which in a way it's very much a horror film, but there's so much more going on that it deserves that crossover kind of like awards and accolades type stuff.
It's just so good.
I find that particularly French horror films, like I'm thinking Raw and Titan as well, they kind of hit a bit harder, or they tend to hit a bit harder. I think Martyrs was French as well, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, Martyrs is one of those films I never need to see ever again.
Oh, crikey. I mean, that damaged me beyond belief. It's like, it's always in the list of most disturbing films, quite rightly. So, on to Chris then. Chris.
Well, it's interesting you've been talking about my number one quite a lot already, because my number one is All of Us Strangers. And it was number one because, A, I'm a real misery guts and I love a miserable film. So, you know, that fits. But actually, I kind of like the fact that it presents us some things and then it's something else slightly as well. I quite like the fact that, you know, unless you're prepared for it, you think it's kind of love story and then it's suddenly a ghost story and the flashbacks and stuff. And it's you know, is it bleak or is it hopeful? You know, that's a kind of big thing that was kind of going on for me when I was watching it. The kind of trilogy of Andrew Haigh, Andrew Scott and Paul Mescal is like the hottest thing you could ever imagine, really, in terms of talent and, well, let's be honest, what they look like. So, you know, that's kind of a winner. But, you know, bonus shout out for Jamie Bell and his amazing moustache. I mean, you know, my most upsetting scene is actually with the hottest man in the film, Jamie Bell, where he's like, you know, he's kind of regretful about how he didn't help him against the bullies when he was at school. That's my real kind of lump in the throat moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, Jamie Bell, whew, hot. So, yeah,
it's the tash, isn't it?
Billy Elliot grewed up.
Yeah. I mean, let's not talk about Billy Elliot, but yeah, no, he's good. I think we've already talked about it a lot. I mean, amazing film. I actually really liked Zone of Interest as well. Raised eyebrows coming from the top right.
Yeah, no, I loved it as well. Yeah, because that came out really early in the year, didn't it?
It was, and I love the fact that it's like this horrific stuff going on that you kind of hear. You get these little kind of hints of it, but you never actually see it. And then you're, as a viewer, you're going through, like the people in the film, is like all this stuff is happening over the fence. You know it's going on, but you can't see it.
The sound editing, and just this, like, you're like, and it is like background noise, but of kind of like, because we know the context, it's like horrific.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, really powerful. I really enjoyed a couple of things that we saw together, Phil. I really liked Last Night with the Devil, about the 70s late night TV show. Love the kind of, there's something kind of quite genuine about a lot of it. It seemed incredibly convincing as a production. And then it just has this completely bonkers last 15 minutes where it's like you've taken the strongest acid ever and you just don't know what the hell's going on. So I quite enjoyed that. I actually really liked a completely different kind of film. I really liked The Holdovers, about the pupils and the staff that have to remain behind in the Christmas holidays in a public school in America. And just really lovely performances, really beautiful story. Again, people having to kind of look at themselves and think about, you know, who they are and stuff. So, yeah, some really, really great films this year, for sure.
The Holdovers is such an amazing Christmassy feeling film, but Christmassy for the reason of it's kind of about people and not necessarily about kind of tinsel and trashy stuff that we get at Christmas, which is fab as well, obviously.
It's such a good movie to watch right now, actually, to revisit that. So,
it's really heartfelt as well, isn't it? Because it's about people, like vulnerable people as well, which I think is great at Christmas because we can kind of relate to that vulnerability. Right, Matt?
Well, the number one I had has been repeated here by a couple people, was The Substance, which Dan was pretty accurate in everything that he said about it, so I don't have to repeat what he said. But it's funny you mentioned French films, French horror films having a harsh kind of like in-your-face element, which I think there were two other French horror films I saw this year that I really liked a lot. One was called, I think it was called Infested. Did you see that about spiders?
Yes, really good.
Is it? I
Yeah,
haven't
it's
seen
really
it.
good. And one called Mads, Mads.
Oh, I want to
Have you
see
seen
that.
that?
That was on Shudder, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's really great. It's like a zombie film. But really well done and really kind of strange. I thought that was really great. Excuse me, Love Lies Bleeding was another one. Civil War was another one, which is pretty terrifying. I qualify that as a horror movie, especially. I don't know if you saw that. This was really shocking to me. A super commercial horror movie that I actually really liked was Smile 2. Did you
Mm,
see that?
I haven't
really
seen it
good. Loved
yet.
it. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it was great. I had no idea it was gonna be. It's like miles above the first one, and
Is it really gory compared to because the first one did have a lot of gore in it, but is it more violent? Have they ramped that up in the second one?
I think it's pretty violent.
Yeah, I would say so.
Excellent.
From the first one.
Just what we need at Christmas. Love it.
Um, and some more like what's a Long Legs as well, which I liked, which we can go into that in a second.
It's on my
Um,
list though,
put-
controversially.
Putting on the mom and dad, grandfather, grandmother hat, I saw Conclave, which I thought was really good. I don't know if you've seen that.
Haven't seen it. But
Really
yeah,
interesting, kind of like talky film. And then Queer, which I just saw this past weekend, which I thought was really good.
Yeah. Paul, is that in your list? Because we saw that last night. Did it make the grade?
I was thinking it might be a late edition, but no.
Yeah, I think mine's it's
It's
just outside for me.
it's great. I liked it, but it doesn't quite didn't quite make it.
Yeah, despite Leslie Manville, as you've never seen her before, looking completely nuts and behaving completely nuts. That was a turn up for the books. Yeah, I was quite surprised by that. Right, well, I mean, there's not really much more to add because you've mentioned a lot of my films in the top 10. Actually, there are a few probably that I don't think either of you have mentioned. Mind you, a couple of these I think Raj definitely would say yes to. Chasing Amy, Raj. I'm surprised you didn't mention that.
Oh, you know what? It probably made my list, but I think it was 15-ish. But yeah, excellent film. I had the chance to interview the director earlier this year. Surprisingly, a lot more layered than you would think about this documentary. So if you haven't checked it out, you're looking for a hot doc. Yeah, definitely seek out Chasing Amy.
It's really good because it's trans filmmaker Sav Rogers, isn't it, who talks about his fascination with Chasing Amy, which incidentally is a film that I haven't seen, although it doesn't really talk too much about that. It's more about his journey, isn't it? Without sounding naff like journey, you know, in inverted commas. It is more about his personal life and his relationship with his girlfriend and how they kind of, I don't know, how he particularly was so inspired by that film and obviously meeting the director of Chasing Amy as well. So, yeah, it's kind of like a love letter, isn't it? It's like a love letter to Chasing Amy, but it's more than that. I just thought it was really interesting, and I thought, yeah, like you say, really layered as a documentary. The other one, Late Night with the Devil, really is a standout horror film for me because I think it's really clever. I know you mentioned that, Chris, as well as being one of your faves. In the sense of Chasing Amy is a really heartfelt film. I think this was as well because I think it feels like it's directed and produced by people that really understand that genre, understand the horror genre, but also are really playful with it as well. And that's why I loved it, because it was fun. It was like a roller coaster ride, and it was interesting and really cleverly done, I thought, with the whole behind the scenes of that TV show as well, and the nostalgia of it, because it did feel like it was genuinely from that era. Love Lies Bleeding we talked about as well. I mean, along with Longlegs, that was one film that I was so looking forward to seeing because I loved St. Maud. St. Maud was such a brilliant debut for Rose Glass. And I think she's just kind of pushed it even further, but went off in a more fun territory, whereas St. Maud was very serious but really gripping. This was gripping, but I think it was more action action-packed in more of a thriller sense. So yeah, so I that is definitely in my top 3. Love Lies Bleeding at 3. All of Us Strangers, we talked about, ruined me completely. I can't put myself through it again, but I think it's one of my favourite films of the year, without a doubt.
As we've mentioned 3 times, can we give a shout out for the soundtrack? Considering, like, 3 of us here, one of the reasons we know each other is through DJing 80s music.
Yeah,
it's like incredible 80s soundtrack that's so evocative and like just great songs.
It's so true, because that scene really got me, where where the mother is dressing the Christmas tree, and she's putting the decorations up, and she's literally mouthing the words, singing the words of the Pet Shop Boys, "You Were Always on the Line," to him, and it's so clever.
I totally agree. I think that the music, it'd be so easy to fall into cliches with a film. Lots of 80s themed films fall into real cliche with the music. But there's something so heartfelt about the music selections in that film that really resonate with the action, which I think resonates with the kind of audience that we are. So, there was real resonance with all those things. They were exactly the right choices, exactly the things that were going to tug on our heartstrings, exactly the right soundtrack. I mean, there was just something very precise about the choices, which just made it exceptional for me, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to mention Longlegs because I keep teasing it. It's like I'm edging Longlegs in this review, because it was probably my most anticipated film, along with The Substance. It didn't deliver what I thought it was going to deliver. Dan, we've talked about this as well, where I think we were very disappointed with where it went. I mean, that third act just ruined it completely for me. It went very Doctor Who, and I didn't want it to go Doctor Who.
It's like a Sylvester McCoy Doctor Who episode of haunted orbs and all that stuff.
But I love the marketing campaign. I thought it was really clever, and if only that film had been completely that vibe, I would have probably given it top 2. But it's number 10 in my list.
It kept getting referred to as a procedural. I'm like, it's not. It's like, it sort of is, and then it goes off into something completely different. So it was not like Silence of the Lambs in any way, because like that doesn't. It's just not a real world film, and it just really bothered me.
And Micah Monroe, I think, Paul, we reviewed Watcher. Do you remember Watcher, the film which was in a few years ago? And that was fantastic. She was really good in that. In this, she was okay. I didn't think she was amazing, though, oddly. I do rate her as an actress, but she just came across as so anxious and so neurotic in that role of the FBI agent, which I thought was ridiculous. Like, you can't hold that job down.
I really enjoy Nicolas Cage in this film, though. I think it's a real performance. I mean, he's having to act, a lot. He's having to. I mean, I can see everyone laughing, so I'm guessing you're not agreeing with me. But I think it's real.
I am. I think Nicolas Cage just normally plays Nicolas Cage, so
exactly. Yeah. So he was doing his job for once, which was good.
Yeah.
He's now almost doing sort of more kitsch, oddball kind of roles, and I guess as he paid his tax bill that he had before, so he doesn't have to make Ghost Rider and things like that.
Mandy.
But, and wasn't there a film about being him or something? There was some, wasn't there? I'm sure there was some film. Completely imagine that
Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. I think it was last year.
Yes.
It was perfectly adequate. I thought it was very pleased with itself, but it was okay.
Well, Longlegs is in my 10, but only just. That's mainly down to elements of the film which I really did love, like the atmosphere of it. The first half I really loved, but it just was ruined by that second half, third act. But yeah, Os Perkins, I think he's an interesting director. He's got another film coming out in the new year, isn't he? Is it The Monkey Man or something? The Monkey?
It's The Monkey.
It's a
Stephen King adaptation.
Yeah.
Looks pretty good, actually. But then so did Longlegs, so we'll see.
Well, yeah, quite. So, yeah, interesting year. Boys, it's great having you all together. And thank you so much for being a part of all this in the last 12 months. I hope it's been interesting for you all.
Pleasure.
When it comes to chatting about films.
Yes. Hopefully lots more next year.
Yeah, bring on 2025. I think we've got some films to look forward to. Let's not get too excited by certain films, though, because, I've been there and let down.
I mean, can I say, if anyone's seen the 28 Years Later trailer, it's really bloody good. I mean, I'm in that area, all trailers look and sound exactly the same. This was like, wow, it looks really good. Again, it might be a long leg situation, but it's just a really good trailer. So,
Dan, do you know what the song is, or it's not even really a song, the recording is in that trailer?
No, do you mean the counting? I don't know what it refers to, but
Yeah,
it's just
and it sounds like a poem that the English narrator is reading.
it sounds almost like threads or something like that. It sounds like a kind of public service announcement that's
It
kind of
does.
read throughout it.
Is it 28 years since the first film when
It's
it comes
not,
out?
and it drives me mad that they haven't waited 3
But it
more
must-
years.
It must be very close. When did that come
It's
out?
2001 it came out. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, 28 years
Yeah.
later would have been 2029, but it's fine. I'm not pedant.
It's not fun.
I'm fine.
It's fine.
That trailer gives me Wicker Man vibes as well, because it feels very kind of witchy, doesn't it? It feels very pagan, that whole kind of like
Oh, love a bit of that.
soundtrack. Yeah, I mean it's not kind of folky, I suppose, but it feels very creepy.
Yeah, and there's a lot of debate whether it is Cillian Murphy that you see as a dead zombie in the film. So that's going to be intriguing to see whether that's the route they've gone with it. But yeah,
Fabulous.
it's really exciting. I think that's kind of the big one for next year.
Are we all excited by Christmas? What are your plans, boys? Raj, are you back now? Because you've been jet setting Spain and everywhere
Yeah, I
else.
just got back last night. Yeah, I'm actually just dog sitting and spending the Christmas, Christmas cheer, and hunkering down and getting some sleep. So looking forward to it.
Excellent. Paul, are you home?
Yeah, I'm going to be with my mum and some of my family. Unfortunately, my husband is going to be away. He's in Australia visiting family, and I'm working not all of it, but I'm quite close to it. So I'm not a huge Christmas person, but I'm not completely bar humbug, so I'm sure I'll have a nice time.
We're DJing together. You've invited me down to 80/20 at the Eagle.
Yes, Christmas party. We can fight over who's going to play Mariah Carey.
Yeah, that'll make you feel festive. Dan, are you home?
I am back at my mum and dad's. Get to regress to being a 14-year-old boy like I do every year, which is kind of fun, but also really weird as you get older. Then I do 6 nights away with mates down in a little village in Canterbury. So that'll be
Oh,
nice.
great.
When you
Yeah.
go home, is it like a day that's enough, and then you just want to be back in London
Getting
again?
shorter. Yeah, I now come back Boxing Day night because it's lovely, but it is just a bit. My nans are still here. I've luckily to have 2 nans still, but they're old enough that we don't know what to do with them except to watch Strictly Come Dancing and Coronation
Oh.
Street. So we have to suffer through that a little bit. So, but I
Best
am very
Christmas
lucky.
ever.
Yeah.
Amazing. Chris, is it dog time? It's always dog time, isn't it? They haven't
yeah.
shown up in the video yet. Can we see them, please?
There's one down here, but he's kind of asleep, so I don't really want to wake him up.
No, don't wake him up.
Let
it's
sleeping
getting
dogs
near-
lie.
Exactly, and it's near dinner time, so if I wake him up, he's just going to be a nightmare. So no, we're just going to close the doors on the world, have a few days to ourselves, and then open the doors again and have to deal with the world again, I guess. It'll be. I'm looking forward to the rest. I'm not particularly looking forward to Christmas. I'm looking forward to having some rest.
Not looking forward to Christmas. Who are you?
Well, I'm not wearing a silly hat. That's who I am.
Snippy. Grinch. Matt, are you doing anything exciting? Please, can we have some exciting enthusiasm for Christmas?
Just hanging out with my husband. Just
Yay!
at home, no real plans.
Yeah,
no real exciting plans.
it's good enough, isn't it? Hanging out with the husband.
It is.
Yeah. Don't watch this video saying nothing exciting. Hanging out with the husband, it's not exciting.
That's the exciting part. Nothing to the outside world exciting, but exciting to us.
Oh, good to see you, boys. And Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, everybody watching. Thank
Merry
you for
Christmas, one and all.
watching throughout the year, and Happy New Year.
Great. Thanks all. Thanks, Phil.
Yeah.